I thought I was about to marry the love of my life. She said we were expecting. I was ready to be a father. I was ready to build a family. But behind that dream was a lie. One so cruel, so calculated. It nearly destroyed me. What she didn't know. I wasn't just planning a wedding. I was preparing for the truth. And when it came, it shattered everything. In front of everyone. If you had asked me 2 months ago, I would have told you I was the happiest man alive. My name is Ethan Carter. 34 years old. Steady career in architectural design. Calm life in a quiet suburb of Portland. And I was weeks away from marrying the woman I believed was the love of my life. Madeline Pierce. The name still tastes bittersweet when I say it now. We met at a charity gala she was hosting. I was dragged there by a colleague. She laughed at my uncomfortable small talk, and by the end of the night, I had her number and a strange feeling that life had just taken a turn. A good one. Fast forward 3 years. We had a beautiful home, a golden retriever named Toby, and a shared Pinterest board with wedding themes and honeymoon spots. I thought we were building something real, something permanent. Madeline was poised, elegant, admired by everyone. The type of woman who made everything look effortless. Be it planning a brunch or holding a conversation with my mother, who never really liked anyone. She made me feel seen, appreciated. At least, that's what I thought. Our wedding was set for mid-June. Late spring sunshine, blooming lavender, a lakeside venue. I'd spent evenings hand-selecting the playlist, writing my vows in a leather-bound notebook she gave me. I even learned to fold those impossible origami place cards. Then, one evening, just as I was pulling dinner out of the oven, she stood in the doorway with that look. The kind of look you can't quite read. "I have something to tell you," she said softly, barely above a whisper. I held my breath. "I'm pregnant." The world blurred for a moment. I dropped the spoon. Then joy. Pure, overwhelming joy. I was going to be a father. I laughed, cried a little, wrapped her in my arms. "You're serious?" I kept asking. "We're having a baby?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. I kissed her forehead, then her belly. I whispered promises I hadn't even known were in me. That night, I stayed awake, hand on her stomach, imagining a child that hadn't even begun to exist in the world. That was the night I began to change. Suddenly, every decision was about our future. I downloaded parenting books, bookmarked articles on car seats and feeding schedules. I called my financial advisor and restructured my savings. I even started picturing what kind of dad I wanted to be, the kind who shows up, who listens, who never leaves, because I never had one like that. You see, my father left when I was 9. No goodbye, no warning, just vanished. And all my life, I'd carried that empty space like a suitcase with a broken handle. Heavy, always there. So the idea of being a dad, it was sacred, a second chance. My redemption arc. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of commitment. I was ready. We shared the news with close friends. Madeline glowed when she told her sister. Her mother looked surprised, but said all the right things. No one seemed overly thrilled, but I figured it was the shock. I didn't care. I was building a family. Finally. Every time I passed by the tiny room that would become the nursery, I paused, pictured a crib, a mobile, little socks. I started collecting names on my phone. Aiden, Leo, Ava, Grace. I even bought a tiny onesie at Target, hid it in my drawer, and maybe if I'd paid attention, I'd have noticed the cracks in the glass, the hesitation in her voice, the glances she shared with no one, the way she flinched ever so slightly when I touched her belly. But love has a funny way of making us blind. That first month of joy, of preparing for a life with her and our baby, was the happiest I had ever felt. It was also the most deceived I had ever been. If part 1 was the dream, part 2 was the slow waking nightmare. The weeks that followed Madeline's announcement should have been golden. Baby showers, ultrasound photos, morning sickness and shared laughter. But instead, something intangible began to settle between us. A distance I couldn't name, but felt growing like fog on a summer morning. It began with little things. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always in her pocket or face down. Her conversations with her mother went from open to whispered. She laughed less, flinched when I came up behind her, smiled but only with her mouth. At first, I chalked it up to hormones. Pregnancy was a lot, right? Her body was changing. She was probably exhausted. I read more articles, listened to podcasts, tried to be better. But even Toby, our golden retriever, sensed it. He stopped following her around, started sleeping only on my side of the bed. I suggested a weekend away, just the two of us. She said she was too tired. I offered to go with her to the doctor. She said it wasn't necessary. One night I brought home her favorite Indian takeout, only to find she'd already eaten. Alone. And then there was the baby. I asked questions. She gave vague answers. I asked about the first ultrasound. She said she forgot to ask for a printout. I didn't want to be paranoid. I didn't want to be that guy. But something inside me was twisting. The turning point came during a Sunday dinner at her family's house. Her father barely looked at me. Her mother asked if I was sure I was ready for this kind of responsibility. Her sister, Clara, just stared at me like I was a character in a book she didn't like. I felt like a prop, placeholder. Not a groom-to-be, but a problem they were solving. After dinner, I offered to help with dishes. Madeline shook her head. Just go sit. It's fine. Her tone wasn't sharp, but it was final. Claire, Madeline's best friend and maid of honor, joined me on the patio. She handed me a glass of lemonade and sat quietly beside me. She was the only one who still spoke to me like a person. You okay? She asked. I shrugged. I think so. She looked at me, really looked. You don't sound sure. I hesitated. Does it feel like something's off to you? She didn't answer right away. Then softly, I've known Maddie a long time, and I've never seen her like this. Like what? Like someone carrying a secret so heavy it's crushing her. I turned to face her fully. Do you know something I don't? Claire held my gaze for a long moment. Then she looked away. Not yet. But if I did, would you want to know? I didn't answer, because yes, I wanted the truth. But I was terrified it might undo everything. Some truths arrive not with thunderclaps, but whispers. It started innocently enough. A missed appointment, a misplaced piece of mail. I was organizing the drawer in the hallway, the one we all have, cluttered with batteries, coupons, spare keys, when I found the envelope. A folded sheet from her OBGYN. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. The date of conception was printed in clear, clinical font. And my breath stopped. I knew the exact week it indicated. Knew it because I had been on a week-long site visit in Seattle. There had been no phone calls, no rendezvous, just emails and check-ins. We hadn't been together that week. Not once. At first, I told myself I was reading it wrong, misunderstanding the window, but I couldn't shake it. I confronted her gently, asked if she was sure about the dates. She brushed it off, said doctors weren't always exact. But her eyes didn't lie. They shifted.
Avoided mine.
Her voice wavered. I went cold. The next day, I searched the closet for our insurance files. I found a secondary document, an earlier appointment slip. The provider name was different. I Googled the name. It was a private clinic. Not the one we'd agreed on. Something broke open inside me. Not just suspicion. A crack of truth. I started checking phone records. I scanned our shared calendar. Then I saw it, the name Derek Hayes. I hadn't heard it in over 2 years. Madeline once described him as a mistake I don't regret, but one I won't repeat. They dated briefly before she met me. I'd asked once if they were still in touch. She laughed. God, no. Now I saw his number in her call logs. Pattern. Late nights. Lunchtimes. Just minutes after I'd left for meetings. I sat down on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone. The onesie I'd bought weeks ago was still in my drawer. I pulled it out, stared at the tiny fabric. It said, "Best surprise ever." And I felt like a man drowning in calm water.
No struggle.
Just the slow, horrifying realization that I'd been trusting a current that was always pulling me under. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But a part of me went quiet. Focused. That's when I called Claire. Can we talk? There was a pause. Come over, she said. Her apartment was small, warm, scented with tea and books. She didn't ask questions at first. Just poured a glass of water, sat beside me. I think she's lying to me, I said. Claire didn't blink. I know. Some people grieve with tears, others with silence. Me? I grieved with strategy. After that night at Claire's apartment, the truth unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Claire had her suspicions too, but more than that, she had access. Old text threads, photos, a few casual voicemails from Madeline oversharing after wine. The picture was clear. Madeline had never cut Derek off. The affair hadn't been brief. And worse, it wasn't just a betrayal of the heart. It was a scheme. She said you'd never leave, Claire whispered, disgust in her voice. That you were too loyal. That you'd raise someone else's child just to keep her happy. I stared at the wall. She's probably right. Claire paused. But she underestimated you. That sentence stuck. In the days that followed, Claire became my co-conspirator. I didn't want revenge born of rage. I wanted precision, truth unveiled, dignity retained. Claire had an idea. Let me give her something. A gift she'll never forget. It was a necklace, gold-plated, elegant, with a small locket. Inside was a micro camera, untraceable, motion-activated, and Madeline loved it. I played along. Told Madeline I was grateful for her honesty, that I wanted a fresh start before the baby came. We'd rebuild trust, I said. I took her to dinner, touched her stomach with wonder. I even rebooked the photographer for the wedding. And all the while, Claire monitored everything. We caught them, Madeline and Derek, at a coffee shop. Her saying, "Once we're married, everything in his name is mine. We'll vanish. Start over." Claire clipped the audio, saved it to a drive, and backed it up. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked one night. I nodded. I need to do this. Not to destroy her, but to reclaim me. The wedding stayed scheduled. I didn't cancel a single vendor. I even added a new item to the run of show.
À surprise présentation.
I wrote a note for myself. Don't forget the USB. The sky was postcard blue. Birds chirped like background singers in a romance film. It was the kind of day you'd dream of for a wedding. And I intended to make it unforgettable. Everything went according to plan. The venue was flawless. Madeline looked radiant. The guests smiled, oblivious. No one knew the truth that curled beneath the surface like a snake in tall grass. Claire was there too, standing behind the floral arch, eyes scanning, calm as glass. She wore a sage green dress and an expression that said everything without speaking. I moved through the morning like a ghost, polite, warm, rehearsed. I let the photographer capture my laughter. I nodded to friends, hugged relatives. But my hands trembled slightly when I buttoned my cuffs. The ceremony began at noon. The music swelled. Madeline walked down the aisle, bouquet in hand, lips trembling. I wondered if it was guilt or excitement. She reached me. I took her hands. I looked into her eyes. And for a moment, I almost hesitated. Almost. But then I remembered the audio. Her voice. "Once we're married. Everything in his name is mine. We'll vanish." I remembered what she stole. Not just trust, but the future I thought was mine. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections, the room held its breath. And I stepped forward. "Before we continue," I said, voice even, "I have something to share." A murmur passed through the crowd. I pulled the remote from my pocket, pressed play. The screen lit up. Footage from the necklace camera. Madeline and Derek. Coffee shop. Her voice. Clear. "He'll never see it coming. He's too devoted. That's his weakness." Gasps. Hands covered mouths. Chairs scraped. Madeline dropped her bouquet. I turned to the guests. "I won't be marrying Madeline today, but I do thank her for reminding me that truth deserves its day." She tried to speak. I didn't let her. I stepped off the stage, walked past her, past the silence. past the shame. And just as I reached the doors, 2 police officers entered from the side. Claire had reported the conspiracy. The law would handle the rest. Outside, the sun still shone. And for the first time in months, I felt warm. I smiled. They say the wheels of justice turn slowly. But that day, they moved with precision. As I stepped out into the sunlight, letting the weight of the ceremony fall behind me, I heard the unmistakable click of polished shoes on marble. 2 officers, in full uniform, walked past me into the venue. Calm, composed. One gave me a slight nod, acknowledgement, not alliance. They knew who they were there for. Claire joined me outside, her phone still warm from the call she'd made that morning. "I sent everything to Detective Morales," she said. "Video, audio, even screenshots of the messages. Will it hold?" I asked. She nodded. "It's enough to open a case. Fraud, conspiracy. Maybe more if the DA bites." Inside, the silence cracked. Voices rose. A woman screamed. Madeline had always been good at playing the victim. But this wasn't a movie. There was no script to rewrite, no audience to charm. For once, she was just accountable. I stood on the steps as the guests filtered out in stunned silence, avoiding my eyes. A few offered quick nods of support. One of Madeline's uncles clapped a hand on my shoulder and muttered, "You did the right thing." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like someone who had finally stepped out of a burning house and could breathe. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. The tuxedo still hung by the door. The ring sat in its velvet box, untouched. I poured a glass of whiskey and stared out at the city. Madeline and Derek would answer for what they tried to do. That was in the hands of the law now. But more than that, I realized something deeper. I hadn't just avoided a doomed marriage. I'd reclaimed my story. Healing doesn't come with fanfare. It comes in silence, in the clink of ice in a glass, in the sound of your own breathing when the world has stopped asking questions. The days after the wedding unraveled slowly. The media didn't swarm, thankfully. The guests kept mostly quiet. And Madeline? Her name faded from conversations like smoke from a candle. I went back to work. Not right away. But when I did, I poured everything into my projects. I designed buildings like I was rebuilding my own foundation. Stronger, cleaner, unapologetically mine. Claire checked in often. Never pushy. Just a text here, a meme there. One day, she left a bag of bagels at my door with a note that said, "Eat. You're still human." We started talking more. About everything and nothing. She never asked how I was unless she really wanted to know. And I never lied to her. "I don't feel angry anymore," I said once. She nodded. "That's because you were never just angry. You were heartbroken." Her honesty was like oxygen. Pure. Unfiltered. Necessary. I began writing again. Not for anyone. Just thoughts. Reflections. What it meant to be seen. What it meant to trust. What it cost to be betrayed. And what it gave you, in strange, quiet ways, to rise again. I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. I was never just mourning Madeline. I was mourning the man I thought I was when I loved her. The future I thought I had. But that man wasn't gone. He was just quieter now. Wiser. Still standing. One evening, Claire and I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights shimmer like a constellation of second chances. "Do you ever wish it happened differently?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "No. Because if it had, you might have stayed. And that would have broken you more than any betrayal." I looked at her. Really looked. And I saw not just the woman who helped me expose the lie, but the one who stayed to witness the truth. It didn't happen all at once. Healing, hope, those things don't crash in like waves. They seep in like sunrise, quiet and slow. Claire and I continued to see each other. Not with urgency, but with intention. We'd meet for coffee, walk through bookstores, sometimes cook together in silence. It was easy, comfortable, and real. Months passed. The seasons turned. I moved out of the apartment I'd once shared with Madeline. Bought a small place near the river, full of windows and morning light. And one Sunday, While unpacking boxes, I found the old leather-bound notebook I had written my vows in. I sat on the floor, thumbing through the pages. Lines written with a different heart, a different dream. Closed it, took a deep breath, and started writing something new. That weekend, I asked Claire to go to the coast. Just us.
No occasion.
No pressure. We walked barefoot on the beach, the ocean humming beside us. The wind tugged at her hair. She looked happy, free. When we stopped to watch the sunset, I pulled a small box from my pocket. Not velvet, just wood. Simple. She looked at me, eyes widening. I don't have a speech, I said. No grand words. Just this. I've seen love at its worst. I've been fooled by it. But you never pretended. You never promised anything you couldn't give. You just showed up. Again and again. You saved me. So now I ask, will you let me spend the rest of my life showing up for you? Claire didn't cry. She smiled. Steady. Certain. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. No guests. No stage. No stolen vows. Just two people. And a promise that, this time, was built not on illusion, but truth.